what I'm thinking is that I'm going to judge this 1,000-yard trial, and it's going to be a big, wide open place. And handlers probably have about 2 months to get ready for it. So I was just wondering, what do you think? What would you see as being problems that people will run into? When you get into that, you're well used to that kind of distance from.
Yes. Well, I find that there's a big step up from local trials to national trials.
Yes.
And you've got your national trials, which is 400 yards, and then a lot of them go on to the Supreme. If they do go on to the Supreme, there's an extra 400 yards, and then those dogs. Some of the dogs do find difficulty. They're not listening. They don't understand that at that distance. They're used to 400 maybe.
Yeah.
But once they've gone further than the 400, it's very new for them. And of course, like if you're not used to that sort of thing, the timing of your whistles is paramount.
Yeah.
And just 400 yards away, there's a gap between the whistle and the dog hearing it. Well, it's twice as far, and you've got to get your timing right, and that's where the big problem is. Dogs listening, they can hardly hear at that distance, and maybe there's a lot of people that tend to shout at their dogs when they're close by.
Yes.
And whistle hard when they're close by. Well, you haven't got that. That's the problem that I see personally myself.
Yes.
If I make the Supreme, I've got it hopefully in them from the previous winter where I've been training for that sort of distance.
Yeah, and I know that you train a lot in the winter and you're thinking ahead, but for anyone that has only got 2 months between it,
yeah,
and what kind of things could they do to help themselves, say, with that distance and the sound and the whistles and things like that? Is there anything they could be practicing in advance?
Of course, find a similar. It doesn't have to be similar, of course, but you want that extra length, don't you? Because and of course the wind factor and everything else. You've got to use the course that you've got, your training areas from one side to the other and the other back and so on, so that your dogs get used to listening for commands rather than.
And for anybody that has a little bit of trouble with their stop, the stop is going to be crucial up there too.
Yes. If you haven't got a stop there, it's bye.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But how do you get that stop that it's dependable at that kind of range?
You do it in stages, like just as if you're training a youngster. My dog's Tom is 4 years old now. I'm still training him.
Yes.
Of course I am, and what I'd be doing, I'd be leaving him in the bottom, going halfway and sending him.
Yes. You'd go half the distance yourself?
I'll go half the distance or maybe quarter the distance, cut down 200 yards until eventually you've got that distance.
Yes.
And that he listens. But if you stand here and ask him to go 1,000 yards, try to stop him. He's not hearing properly. He's got the sheep running in front of him.
Yes.
Or her. And it's just then goes into a chase.
Yes.
You've got to train that dog to listen for that command. So that's the best way to do it, is to get your dog lying down here, move 300-400 yards. If you've got 1,000, you're very lucky.
Yes.
We haven't got 1,000 in Wales, nowhere in Wales, but except on the mountains.
Well, that's another thing I was going to ask you about, Alan. Like, there's lots. We're in Holland now, and it looks like there's loads of ground, but there's dikes and there's all kind of things in between. So if somebody hasn't got, they say, well, my fields aren't that big. What kind of things, are there any tricks you can do or anything you can do to try and extend that distance where maybe you haven't got those big fields? Like, what do you do in Wales if you can't travel to a big place?
Yeah. Well, me personally, I train. I've got about 60 acres, but it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields.
Yes.
Well, actually 7 fields. So it's about 50 something acres.
Yes.
So, and I've got gates in both sides of the fields and in the middle. So I train my dogs to go up from one field to the other, to the other, to the other, to the top.
Yes, and then you have them at that distance, and you can feel the timing and all. And then the other thing is, just when you said about that with the gates and all, is that a good thing too, Alan, for teaching them to steer and pull in or blow out, maybe to find those gates?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's something somebody could try and do a little bit. They
Yeah.
could practice using gates or different
Exactly.
fields.
Yeah. Am I getting paid for this?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll give him some more Sandy's Heineken.
Yeah, it is. Of course, it is. You know, you can on a field like that. If you got a gateway on the left-hand side, and you know you train in this first field to start off with,
Yeah.
and the dog goes for those sheep. Then you have them in the second field. Then you teach the dog, and hopefully he will come in so that you give him a bend out.
Yes.
So he'll learn to go. He's got to go to the corner
Well,
and
that's
bend out.
That's what I was thinking for fellas on these big courses. They might need to pull him in or blow him out a bit,
Pull him
and
in
the dog
and blow
needs
him
to know
out.
what that
Yes.
means when you're doing
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that,
No
Alan,
worries.
because that's those are a couple of very helpful ideas. Even though people have a short time, but still
Yeah.
it's a time to be a
That's
little
it.
bit creative.
Best of luck to everybody.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. I'm going to judge this trial, and it's going to be 1,000 yards. It's a big place, big open place and all. And fellas only have, there's about 2 months, it's on in like early June. But if you had 2 months now before a big trial like that, what kind of stuff would you work on, Serge? You know, 1,000 yards and...
With your dog, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, make sure they got length in their outrun. I think you can train that so they get used to think in distances. I think that works well. And maybe work on a silent fetch, that they lift on their own, keep them quiet, because there's a good chance that you can't reach them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way.
And so, Serge, like you've been in lots of world finals there, you've been second and third and all, and big, massive courses, but in different countries and everything. But you're here, you're living in Holland, and all the fields, I see them all day. Like they look like they're long and all, but they're flat, and they have dikes in them and all.
Yeah.
So how do you get length? How do you get distance into your outruns?
We have to try and find those fields.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
maybe ask the farmer if we can practice on their field, take a trailer and a few sheep and
Yes.
drop them off. And in the winter I do get big fields,
Yeah.
like over 1,000 yards long.
Oh, do you?
fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And-
that's fine. And they, I think when they got that length in their system, they do that, I think.
And what about then controlling? Like I was talking to Alan, and he said, you know, the timing is different and all.
Yeah. They say you lose a second every 300 meters. So you have to really think ahead, or make the dog work on his own, I think.
Yeah. And
Maybe just a steady, and then hope that he will balance. And
there's a thing that I'm not that good at. When you say about, you know, letting him work on his own a little bit at that kind of distance,
yeah.
like, I mean, I'm the judge, but I'm wondering, how do you do that? Like, how do you get that into your dogs?
I think if you can train them to stay in first gear,
Yeah.
that every time you just shout at them when they speed up, and when they're in first gear, you say nothing.
Yes.
So they start to find out that if I walk in first gear, then I'm okay. The only problem in here, well, you've seen the sheep here today, we want the dog to speed up.
Yes.
We want to keep that forward gear in them,
Yes.
because heavy sheep, they need to be pushed. So that's quite a difficult balance. But if I knew that I was going to a trial like that next week or something, I would consider that this week I would only train on that let the dogs lift on his own and keep him in first gear, and really growl at him when he comes out of that first gear.
Yes.
So he knows. And after that, I would let him go again.
And so what you're saying, that if you screw down that control a little bit, and that the minute he comes out of first gear, you're on his case, and he learns then that, Serge leaves me alone when I don't speed up.
That's the principle, that if no news is good news, and when he makes a mistake, that's how dogs work with each other.
Yeah.
They never praise each other, they only say when it's wrong.
Well, that's interesting, because I often see people, and maybe they stop their dog and they say lie down, the dog lies down, they say good dog.
Yeah, there's no need to do that. I
Yeah.
think when the dog is unsure, I would do that. Probably.
Yes.
But I think the only thing this works when you only work on that, in that period. So don't start shouting about flanks or bad stops, because then he doesn't know why you shout, of course.
Yeah, so just focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering how you train them to stay in that nice gear and leave the initiative up to them.
That's the important thing, that you only take that subject out and only work on that. Because then they find out really quickly, if I speed up, he shouts, and if I stay in first gear, he says nothing.
Oh, I like that a lot now.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that.
And it's the same when he goes out of direction. You shout again, and as soon as he's back in direction, you say nothing to him. And then they learn to balance them in first gear.
Oh yes. And are there any other kind of problems you can see, fellas? Like you've judged a lot over the years, and you've watched trials, you're seeing mistakes that people are making. Anything else you can think of at that kind of distance?
Yeah, I train a lot on redirections in the outrun.
Yeah.
And I do that all year round, so it's really in their system. They know when they hear a whistle, they have to go out or in.
Yes.
Especially on the distance, they can't spot the sheep, I guess.
Yes, you have to
So,
help them a little bit. Sometimes they get a bit lost.
Yeah.
That's the thing I was thinking about, that if I was running in that trial, I'd like that if my dog gets a bit lost, because we can't assume he's going to get the outrun right.
Yeah.
So if he gets a bit lost, what are we going to do? How are we going to get that pull in or that blowout?
Yeah.
And I know you're not going to get that in a month or whatever, but what kind of things do you do to get that, pull in and blowout?
What our sheep, we got texels, and they spread out in the field and they stay separated. It's not when they see the dog that they all bunch together.
Yes.
So it's quite easy then to send them on the first bunch of sheep and then stop them halfway and open them on the other. So they always get a reward then too.
Yes.
Or send them for the second bunch, and as soon as they are on the way, you call them in on the first bunch.
Yes.
So they get a reward again then.
Yeah.
They get their sheep. There's always something to.
Yeah, and so then they realise when Serge pulls me in there, that's what he wants, and there's something good in it for the dog too, and then he associates those things. Yeah.
And it's not a look back; it's just a stop and an extra away or an extra come by. And
funny, I see that sometimes maybe in trials. Maybe her dog is coming in a little bit early, and they'll stop him and tell him to look back. What do you think about that? That doesn't sound like what you're talking about.
What I do is I start training with I stop the dog on lie down.
Yeah.
Then I run towards him and keep repeating the lie down with a bit of pressure. And as soon as he puts his nose out, then I give him his reward in the form of a away. And I do the same with the whistle later on. I do a short whistle, lie down, but I do. Then they start to.
Yeah.
When I do a long lie down whistle, they start to open the heads because they know, and then I can send them there or give the reward there, so you can give directions in the.
So really, opening them out or pulling them in is all about getting them to turn their head like a steering wheel to where you want it.
Time it if you want a little bit out or you want them completely out. But I keep the pressure on the lie down until they.
That's the important thing. So why do you keep shouting to lie down at them when as you're making your way up?
Because I want them to push the head out.
Yes.
In the first start, I stop the dog, let's say on 50 meters, and I walk in a straight line, so I come next to the dog.
Yes.
And then I can start walking towards the dog and keep repeating the lie down. And as soon as he turns his head out, I let him go.
Yeah. So when you walk up parallel and then you start to walk towards him, he feels a bit of pressure off you. Plus you're saying lie down.
He always gets a reward when he does. Put his head out.
And then
they start very quickly. They start to do like this.
Yeah.
And they don't feel it as pressure. They just know it's.
So when you stop them, then they're nearly what the Serge want, and they nearly come up with the answer themselves.
And if you do that a lot, you see a lot of dogs when you stop them, they come in and they start looking at you.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult one to get them out again. Then.
I had that problem, and the dog was looking at me, and I was thinking, why are you looking at me? It's not written on my face.
But I stop them a lot on the outruns, walk parallel, and then get them going again. So they learn really quick that they have to keep looking in that direction instead of looking back at you. Yeah,
so even though the time is short now, people could start to practice these little things a bit and just.
I would do it in the week before.
Yeah?
Yeah. Short close to the, then it's really in the system.
It's fresh in their mind,
And you check if they stop well on the whistles, if they're easy to pull in or to pull out and to push out.
Yeah. Well, come here, Serge, thanks very much for that.
You're welcome.
Hopefully we'll have a world trial again soon, and hopefully we'll see you there in the final again. And in the meantime, we can do a bit of practice there. We'll learn some of your tricks. Thanks, Serge.
Good. You're welcome. Take care.
Con, you've been in plenty of them big trials and supreme finals and qualifying for Irish teams and lots of big trials and all. This trial in Canada is going to be a 1,000-yard outrun, and I was wondering, what sort of problems do you see? You've judged a lot of these big trials too. You've judged internationals. What's typical problems people run into when you get the big distances like that?
Well, there are a few problems like that come to mind that will hit everybody and everybody that's going out there. The first one is to get your dog out there, and the second one is to be able to stop him when he is there.
Yeah.
They're the two big problems. And that you can control him on the way in, that dog doesn't think, well, I'm here, I have them now, and I can bring them down until I get close, and then I listen.
Yeah. So Con, if you were going to be running that competition yourself now, and you had 2 months to get ready for it, how would you work on something like the distance and all? Because I know where you're from too, you don't have big fields, but you've often had to get ready for competitions like this. What sort of stuff could you do?
Well, we're crucified with small fields, you know, so you have to go places and make preparations, but you really have to get the dog to listen to you in a small area first anyway before you go there, and get the dog that it will bend as you ask it. That if you ask it to listen to you on its way out and bend, that it will do it. Now, even though you have that homework done, it might not always happen, but you have to assume that it will happen, and you have to do the preparations that it will happen. And if you watch most of the top handlers out there, 9 times out of 10 it does happen.
Yeah, we're on our way back from the European nursery final there this weekend and all, but I saw a couple of handlers there. I saw where they might have to stop their dog on their way out, where the dog is coming in, and I saw Nigel Watkins do it, and he did it lovely. He stopped him, and then he gave another command. The dog opened up and got his cast right. But how do you go about training something like that?
Well, despite what people think, like that's always done.
Right.
Well, despite what people think, like all of that training is done close at hand, and as you say, Nigel Watkins, you see him doing it well. There are many more will do it well also, but they all do it close at hand. Most people think that you need big areas to train those things. You don't. You have to be in control of the dog all the time. You stop them in the right position before they actually come in.
Yeah.
You stop them when they look in, or when they think they have any notion of coming in, and you check them by stopping them and putting them back out to where they should have been in the first place.
Yeah, so that'll be the main thing, is getting that number one thing you see is getting the dog out to the sheep. And what happens if he runs too wide, Con? Would you have a pull in on him, or what do you do if he gets a bit lost like that?
Well, some of them do get lost, but as you know, in our cases, they don't have room to get lost very often. But they could get lost in wide open spaces, and you would have to call them in. Some dogs are much better at that than others, you know, and some dogs think they know where they are going, and then of course you get good spotters.
Yeah.
You'll get dogs that are very good spotters at 200 or 300 yards, and most of the time there is very little done with their outruns because they are so perfect.
Yes.
in that region, in that distance. But then you go someplace where the sheep are 600-700 yards, or like you were saying, first 1,000 yards, and all of a sudden the dog can't see nothing.
Yeah.
And he might think that, okay, now I'm out 300 yards, so they must be there somewhere. And if he starts coming and you've made no preparations, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. So you would say then it is very important to try and get out a few places, even if you have to bring sheep and ask somebody for a bit of big ground. You need to get out places to find out what you're going to get at that distance before you go to that trial.
Oh, you do. The dog you need to be sure that the dog can get out. There's no use in going to the Derby with the pig.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you need to make sure that he can get out, and you need to be sure that you're in the control of him, that you can assist him to get out.
Yes.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah,
know?
that he understands when you're stopping him to open him. He knows what's happening.
So you need to work a strategy like from the beginning, like when you have your dog running out 200 or 300 yards and he's doing all that part well and he's matured, you need to start putting him out in front of you, walking him out in front of you and casting him out.
Yes.
And stopping him and casting him out again. And you need to continue that until you know you can do it at 400 and 500 and 600 yards. And then you're in with a chance.
Yes. And then the next thing you mentioned, that stop at 1,000 yards, how do you get that stop? You can probably barely see your dog.
You don't get to stop at 1,000 yards, you get it at 50 yards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You won't get, if you happen to stop at 50 yards, you're not going to get it at 1,000 yards. He stops on the stop whistle, it doesn't matter how many yards. But if you're letting him go 1,000 yards without a stop, then you'll have the sheep down to 100 yards before the dog stops and the trial is over.
Yes.
So
yes.
if the stop is correct, he will stop no matter what distance.
And so what are you saying, to get that stop right and then sort of extend it and make sure you have it as you get out a bit further, and that, or don't go too big if you don't have it?
Absolutely, you have no business going big until everything is right close at hand.
Yeah.
No business at all. You know.
And sometimes I see people and they think their dog is stopping well, but maybe he's not stopping that well. It's just that he's not causing any problems. Would people be as well maybe to get somebody else to look over them and make sure that's right? Or how do you, I suppose you know yourself when you look if he's not stopping, but well, I suppose that's the answer to my own question really. When he goes a bit bigger, you'll find out that he's not stopping.
Well, of course, we all know if they're not stopping. Everybody knows that bit. But the thing is, he has to stop.
Yeah.
You know, if they stop, okay, standing on their feet's lovely and all that's grand, and stand on their feet, but they must stop.
Yeah.
I'd stand on his feet when I'd have to stop right, but I'd make sure he'd stop on the ground when he'd be a young dog.
Yeah.
If I asked him to stop on the ground, I'd make sure he stopped.
Yeah, so they're the number one ingredients to being at the races and getting your chance is number one to be able to get out there, and number two is be able to stop him when he is out there.
Well, if you cannot stop him, he's out of control.
Yeah.
And if he's out of control, the sheep are in trouble, and you're in trouble, and everybody's in trouble.
Yes.
And that's not the way to go, you know.
Yeah.
People take great offence of being called off and all kinds of things, but really they shouldn't. People aren't calling them off for nothing.
Yes.
You know, mainly your dog is out of control or whatever if you're being called off.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you've seen it from both sides. You've seen it from the competitor side and from the judge's side. So yeah, you have the advantage of knowing what it looks like from the box too. And
absolutely, if it has happened to any white man out there, it has happened to me. So I don't wonder at anything that happens out there. But I know that if the sheep were in trouble, or if I was in trouble, I'd be inclined to go off as quick as I could and get away with as little trouble as possible.
Yeah.
But I've seen people chase sheep all over the field and be upset when they were called off, and it doesn't make common sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, thanks very much, Con, for giving us the thoughts on them two things, and people will have a couple of things to work on, and that's how you'd go about it anyway.
Well, that's the way I'd run it anyway. I'd make sure that I could turn them and twist them close at hand.
Yes.
And I'd extend the distance gradually.
Yes.
Out to the 1,000 yards. Yeah. But if he wouldn't stop the first time at the 1,000 yards, he would come back to the close distance.
Yes, you did. Shorten it back up again and get it back
straight
in.
away, yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Con.
No problem, buddy.
So Rob, you're no stranger to those big courses and everything else coming second. That big Supreme last year in Carmichael. What sort of, for handlers going out in a big trial like this one in Canada where it's 1,000 yards of an outrun and all, what sort of, well, if you had to pick three problems that you thought fellas could run into, what would they be?
Probably you could have your dog fit to start. If you're running out that far, like you could have a warm day, so you could take a lot out of your dogs. You want them fit, so you want to be preparing weeks or even a couple of months in advance, so they're fit and ready to go. And if you can get the chance to go and train in a large place, go there.
Yes.
I'm not saying all the time, but quite a few times, so the dog can listen at distance, because quite a few dogs, in my experience, my own dogs, and they take advantage of you at distance.
Yes.
Even happened with my own dog Todd.
Yes.
Yeah. Struggling with sort of going to big places to train, stuck on sort of 400-500 meter outruns. Dog works well at that distance, but then forgets to listen at 1,000 meters at different things. So if you can prepare in a large place, not all the time, but
well, let
twice.
me ask, say you go to that large place and you've planned that next week you're going to some place where you can get that distance into it. How, and to say the stop is just not there and all, how would you go and correct that or help that?
Well, you want to be in the training paddock. If you go 1,000 meter outrun, you want to make sure they're going to stop.
Yes.
So you want them in TikTok training then. So you wouldn't want to be going too far too soon. You want to be building up to that 1,000 yards.
So if you're like 2 months out, you're thinking about the fitness and all, but the stop and getting that stop at the 1,000 yards begins closer in.
Yeah, because you want to go, say, 500 meters and see how they go in at 5. If they don't, you'll want to come back a little bit until they understand this is what they want or you want, and then gradually progress the distance as you're going. Because an experienced dog he's probably done that before, so you will know roughly. But a younger dog going through that first competition, you'll want to be testing him a little bit on strange ground, or
Yes.
so he'll gotta listen to you, and you gotta. If the urine is difficult, sometimes in these trials we can't control the weather. The wind comes up or different things. Will he sort of use his own initiative at that distance? So sometimes you haven't got to be under strict control, but can you trust them at that distance?
Yes.
And that's what a lot of, like when you're at home, you can prepare for that a little bit, leave them to their own devices a little bit, and if they are sort of getting a little bit worked up or a little bit too fast or whatever they're doing, at least you know if you want to correct them, they're going to listen to you.
Yeah, so you'd be looking for those signs when you're training at
Yeah.
that 300 or 500 yards.
Yeah.
It just, and then the other thing is, so there's one thing anyway, you can work on the fitness.
Yeah.
The other thing is to try and schedule in a few of those longer runs, and see where you're at with it for hearing and things like that. But what happens if you're a fella that you just don't have access to those bigger, longer runs? Is there another way to set that up?
Well, it's difficult then, because you got to have experience of knowing out what your dog is going to do at that similar distance. Then, if you can do it, but try and go to a field or at an area that is sort of bigger than what he's used to.
Yes.
If you can.
Yes.
Like I'm running a young dog now. He's 20 months. And I've put him long distance and he's taken advantage of me.
Yes.
So we've come back
Yes.
closer to hand, but let him feel his own way into the sheep and let him bring sheep to me without too many commands. Just let him learn for himself a little bit.
Yes.
But some people can't. I haven't got the facilities to do that or the time, if you get what I mean. So like the older handlers, when I can remember when I first started, they like to let a dog take control of them sheep themselves, and it was great. But competition's so strong now, we can't leave them to their own devices.
Yeah.
But when they're at that distance, you've got time to leave them to their own devices to feel the sheep, because our eyesight, it's a long way away, so
Well,
we can't. Our timing is not quite the same.
There's
as
a
what
very
it is.
important thing. So when it's that far away, really we need to be able to trust
We
the
gotta
dog, because
trust
we
the dog.
can't tell
Yeah.
them where to be all
No,
the time.
that's right. And in the early stages of training, you can let them work a little bit themselves. So when they come to doing this kind of
Yes.
job, then later in life, they know exactly how to balance. I know every dog's an individual, and some can, some can't. But if you give them the opportunity to do it, because I know, Paddy, you like to do a lot of practical work with your dogs. Same as me, I like to give a practical work. And through practical work, that's when they learn to understand sheep sense and different things.
Yeah.
And to me, that's important in the dog. 'Cause-
Well, it's nice to have a sort of an all-round dog.
Yeah.
Where I might be a little bit slack when it comes to polishing them up a
well,
bit, but
yeah, I know what you mean. But
you like them to understand the overall picture.
Yeah, because when you come to a big competition, like we were in Scotland in the international last year, I couldn't guarantee on my eyesight the pace them sheep were coming, or if there's an awkward one in the bunch. But you've got to rely on the dog's ability a little bit to just lean here and lean there just to keep things together, or ease back on the pace or pick the pace up.
You and I were in the world trial, and I know exactly what you mean at that distance. I was thinking, and I came a bit quick, and I was saying, Paddy, why didn't you take it slower? That was a long way away.
It was a
There
long
no
way
hurry.
away, because your timing is totally different at that distance. And that goes back to the competition here now. We're focusing on the dog, but the handler as well has got to be clued up on the timing and the pace. So when it's at that distance, the handler got to prepare for that distance also.
Yes.
And that's a big thing as well.
Yeah.
Because we're expecting the dog to do the work, but we've got to help
Well,
as
then,
well.
it's like you said, if you're not comfortable with that distance, you might blow a whistle. And
Yeah.
you think he hasn't heard it, and you blow another one,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the first one's still only getting there.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And then, like, give a flank at that distance. It takes time to get there, and also when you see the dog moving, we blow and stop straight away,
Yeah.
and then things could start to go wrong. This is down to sort of preparing. it's got to be done months in advance, because
Yeah.
you don't want to be training just before a big competition like that. You want to be
Yeah.
working the dog and letting him sort of
Yeah.
relax a little bit. You don't want to making him tense. And
There's a thing you said too. So what you'll be trying to do is, when you're working him at a reasonable distance,
Yeah.
you're trying to say, Lyle, just stay quiet now. We see what happens,
Yeah.
and let him develop
Yeah,
his
yeah,
initiative
yeah,
a bit,
that's
and
right.
trust him a bit there.
yeah, that's right. Because funny enough, back in the winter, obviously the dark nights, you're scrolling through a bit of YouTube on the TV, on your phone or whatever, and a few videos of Bobby DL came up training a young dog. Only
Yes.
short little clips, 5-10 minutes, and it showed him on a lump of a bit of ground with about 40 sheep, and this young dog going out, picking him up, and have him to just work him across this ground on his own, not back to him, just working him across this ground and letting him think for himself.
Yeah.
But if you that then in a big competition is a big help, because you haven't got to be shouting or whistling hard on the dog. You can sort of guide the dog, help the dog.
Yes.
And he said in his interview that how quick this dog has learned from the last time he was here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And if you can do a little bit of that, that's a big help for a big course like that, because it was tough going in Scotland last year, and probably if he hadn't had the experience he've had through the years,
Yes.
and practical experience,
Yes.
it wouldn't have been so easy for me
Yeah.
to concentrate on what I've got to do.
Yeah. There's that, and then you have a lot of experience in like these big top level competitions and all. But you do need to get getting comfortable with that
But
distance.
yeah, and also if you can go to, say, this is a trial we're talking about here is 1,000 meters. If you can get to a trial that's 600 meters,
Yes.
try the dog and see what you got to improve on to go back with.
Yeah.
You'll have a rough idea of what
where the
needs,
homework is. Yeah.
where
We're
it
here
needs
at
to be
the European Nursery for the weekend.
Yeah.
And now my dogs are a little bit. My expectations weren't too big. They're a year too early.
yeah.
But I can go home clearly. I can clearly see all the things I need to work on.
Yeah. And probably same as what problems I've got, is not matter of training so much, is letting the dog mature and become a dog.
And get the mileage and
Mileage
experience
in,
and these
yeah,
things.
that's what a lot of it is.
Yeah.
And we tend to rush the training a little bit, perhaps.
Well, I was banging it all in for the last month
Yeah.
before this because they weren't ready, and I was just thinking,
that's right.
we'll get it all into them. But
Yeah. But it's a build up to a big competition like this. You got to feel your way in, and
that's another thing I want to just ask you about. So, I'm really bad for it. Sometimes I'll go to competitions where I haven't really prepared enough, and that's okay. But then I need to have my expectations in line with that. So some people might go to this big 1,000-yard trial with big plans for what they're going to do, but maybe they just haven't got all the homework done. They're a bit like me.
Yeah. Because we've all done it. We've all gone to a place, blamed the dog for this, blamed the sheep, the course, perhaps the judge. But then when it comes down to the actual bigger picture, it's all down to the preparation and the training, and we don't look at ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've done it quite recently now. I had someone to video my run and then go back over
Tell
and
yourself
say,
the truth.
Yeah, and then have a look and think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this and that. Because in the Welsh National this year, we had a difficult sort of day with sheep. They weren't penning. They were good sheep, but they were the same for everybody.
Yes.
But they were difficult to pen. And I was running a youngish bitch, and she was doing very well, and the sheep were going in, and one bolted up the side. And when I came off, I thought, blame the sheep for this. But Kevin Evans said to me, he said, if you hadn't have moved, he said, they would have gone in.
Yes.
And I looked at him and thought, what the hell are you talking about? But when I actually looked back on the live stream, I'd taken a step forward and pushed the ewe up the side.
And it's funny,
Yeah.
one step was
One
enough to make
step
her change her mind.
Yeah, was enough to put the pressure in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And it was so easy to blame the sheep, but it was actually my fault.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've all got to look at the full picture rather than blame.
Yeah.
It's easy to blame, but we got to look at the
Well,
the
if we
full
want to
picture.
get better, you have
And-
to
and
tell yourself the truth. don't you?
Yeah, because like in South Wales, I can only talk for South Wales because I regularly trial there, and the competition's so hot. We're up against 2 or 3 supreme champions, and if we don't prepare we got no chance of trying to compete with them guys.
If we don't prepare, all we have is excuses.
Exactly, yeah. So you've got to prepare in advance.
Well, I tell you, here's the thing that I think is what I like about top fellas now. We were at the European nursery here. The last time I was here, maybe 6 years ago, and a big wind came up and all. And I was out and I was finding it hard to stand in the shedding. Yeah. And then I saw Kevin shedding. And it looked like there was no wind.
No.
And when he came in, I said, you were out practicing every time there's a storm.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether he does or not. But that's the thing, that if for the Canadian guys, if they get some really bad weather, could be a good opportunity to train.
Could be, yeah. And it's preparation. You've got to prepare for these big competitions, because you can't just rock up to 1,000-yard outrun and expect the dog to run like he is on a 400-500 meter.
Well, and even if he could, you need to be ready for the distance.
Yeah, of course we do. Of course we do. Yeah, because like we're both here in the European nursery, and we both had difficulties, and it's easy to blame everything else, but when it comes to it, it's down to the ability of what the dog can do at the time.
Yes.
And you're the same as me. You were running a young dog. I'm running a young dog, and I'm running at an experienced pitch. But probably my younger dog has got more ability than my experienced pitch.
Yes.
But I'm expecting more from the experienced pitch. But these sheep are pulling out the bad traits in my bitch, then, if you get my meaning, because she haven't got the ability to sort of lean and bend and keep the sheep together, whereas the younger dog, he's trying hard but I haven't got the experience.
Yes.
So it's and another year experience will help.
Well, and in your case, you have the beauty now that you have the experience and you can see the difference, and you can give the dog the time, and you haven't got the big expectations. Something happens here, it's a bonus, but if it doesn't, you've still got a nice dog coming. Yeah.
And like talking about the big courses, I went to High Hills Trial up with Johnny Elkin back last summer. Never been there before. Second in the qualifier with Todd. 6th with the younger bitch. 8 competing qualifying that day for the final. Kevin Evans 4 dogs in the final. 4 dogs in the final. Sorry, he ran 6, 4 in the final, and he gave us all an exp.
I heard about this.
Yeah, and I came home from there and thought, well, this is a learning curve here. You just can't rock up to a trial like this. It's not a normal trial and expect to have good results.
Yeah.
Blaming the dog, blaming the sheep, but it's not. It was down lack of preparation.
And the beauty is that we're lucky really to have fellas like Kevin or James McGee or whoever it is, or you, to put up a really good run, because then we go, I just took away all my excuses. I could be doing so much better here.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of recording the run. When you went back over it, you can see exactly the mistakes you make. Because when you concentrate and working on the dog, you can't really see the full picture. Because some people do judge their own run. I can't do that. I'm relying on the judge to do it. But when you go back over it, you can see your mistakes, and you're watching it like as if you're a spectator. And we all make mistakes. We're all human. And some people, how can I explain, are cleverer than others then. And they can see a mistake happening before it's happened.
Yes.
But then, like, if you're not that experienced, you can work on them things.
Yes.
It's always.
Yeah. So even if it doesn't go super or whatever, it's still an opportunity to grow and develop as a handler.
Like, you were going to judge this trial now in Canada, but like these people is running there, and perhaps not doing so good this year. Yeah. They know what to expect for next year, so you can prepare for that next year then.
Yes.
It's not all about going to this trial and winning for this year. It's next year also.
Well, and see that we need that experience as handlers. You and I are here, and I don't know how good you're going. Maybe you'll be in the final. I don't know.
No,
I won't be either. But we know where that fits into the overall picture. So we're not going home all deflated.
No, and that's the beauty of sheepdog trialing, because we were talking, myself and Kevin were talking after the Supreme on the way home actually. He phoned, whatever, we phoned each other, we was talking away. And if we'd run the same course the day after, it would have been a totally different result. We might not have done so good then, we might have had a rogue sheepdog, might not have been in quite so good a form. Yeah, that's the beauty of sheepdog.
Gwyn Penmacna used to say that to me. He said if we had the international again the next day, we'd probably have a different winner. But I know if we ran the international every day for a week, there's probably a couple of fellas who are going to be in the top 3
course
every
it
time.
is, yeah,
And that's where
yeah.
that preparation and,
Well, that's
and experience.
preparation, yeah. Because I remember we had a party for Kevin. It was organised after he had won the doubles and won the Supreme
Yeah.
in 2019. And Ricky Hutchison made a bit of a speech for Kevin. And he said, I remember him winning his first Supreme in 2008. And he said he won that Supreme because he was prepared for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that sort of is still in my head. That is no one. Like, it's taken a long time. I'm a slow learner, Paddy. It's taken a long time for it to sink in.
I often think
He is right. Yeah.
Well, I think it has to hurt for to make us change and do the work.
Yeah,
like.
of course it is. Yeah. We all have had disappointments, but you've got to learn from them disappointments.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you don't make a mistake, you're not human.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So to sum up, the boys only have about 2 months, and ladies, they only have about 2 months left.
Yeah. And now's the time to crack on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now's the time to go there and start preparing new dogs, because they got to be fit for it.
Yeah.
And they got to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And now's the time to put that, because you don't want the dog tired going to the trial.
No.
So now's the time to do the preparation.
Yeah.
And coming up to the event, you want to be just ticking the dog over and doing,
And keeping it
keeping
happy
it fresh.
and
Yeah. That's the
yeah.
the long and short of it. Sometimes hard for these people, because we've all, like, I got a day job and we're rushing home from work just to do this. It
Yes.
is difficult, but if you want to do it, you'll make the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for taking time to talk to me, and it's been fun talking to you here over the weekend.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you.